All right.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark Radulich. I'll be your host for this evening on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network proudly presents Long Road to Ruin. And you might be thinking to yourself, Long Road to Ruin, wasn't that the thing that him and Sean did like years ago that they said they weren't going to do anymore? You're not wrong. We did do that podcast for a while, and then we retired it for a bit in favor of doing something a little different, which is where we got On Trial from. But this year, being 2019, we decided on the occasion that the subject material should present itself in a way that discussing the entire franchise was more fun than beating up, or not beating up as it were, a single movie. We would dust it off and present it to you. So after a long, brief, depending on how you look at it, hiatus, it's back. And we'll, over the course of the year, we'll go back to it again. We've got Constantine that we're going to look at. No, sorry, not Constantine. We are looking at that one, but that's not a franchise now, is it? We're going to be looking at the John Wick franchise later on this year when John Wick Parabellum comes out. Later on, at the end of the year, we've got a Christmas one. I think we're doing the Santa Claus finally, which we meant to do during the first iteration of Long Road to Ruin. So we hope you'll be with us, and we hope you enjoy this oldie but a goodie. Tonight on the docket, as it were, is the Hellboy franchise. This week we reviewed on Damn You Hollywood, myself and Ronnie Adams reviewed the reboot of Hellboy, and that gave me the idea to go back and revisit I think a franchise that many people liked, but regardless of how well it did, how much people liked it, did not bring about any more sequels, more than 2 movies. Kind of died after that, and then because Del Toro didn't come back, they decided to reboot the thing. It has a sort of a weird niche audience, and so to talk about that and a lot of the other details of this franchise, where it went right, where it went wrong, etc., it's my old partner in crime for Long Road to Ruin. Here he is, folks, Mr. Sean Comer. How do you do, sir?
Hello, Radulichians. I'm Sean. You're not. You know, when we ended this show last time, I was secretly living out of my car, and now here we are. Today, I am a family man. I am back in the brand new fortress of Shaunitude here in lovely Kansas City, Missouri. I even have an office that I'm recording out of now. How's that? Even when we used to record this when I wasn't living in my car, I was usually sitting in my living room with my laptop in front of me, in front of the TV. Now I actually have a little dedicated creative space where the magic can happen. And by magic, I mean I'm going to sit here, eat sour gold bears, drink cherry vanilla Coke Zero, and talk about 2 of my favorite comic movies ever. God damn, this feels good. I'm so glad we decided to bring this format back.
Yep, we brought everything back but the theme song because, quite frankly, I didn't want to put the effort into uploading a song that was inevitably going to get me a YouTube copyright strike.
Oh, in my head, I have got the Foo Fighters playing on loop.
You know, it's funny, the whole week that I've been thinking about this and kind of mentally preparing for this show, I've had the Foo Fighters in my head.
Right?
Kind of singing it to myself as I walk to my computer, and then I'm like, no, I don't. We're not doing this that often that I feel the need to deal with YouTube and upload the song. But, you know, if it matters to everybody, Long Road to Ruin, and in your eyes, and go speed like, hey! All right, here we go. So, all right, Sean, so we're talking about Hellboy 2004 and then Hellboy 2008, the Golden Army, the Golden Shower, the Golden Circle.
Hey, you show some respect to Guillermo del Toro and Ron Perlman. It's the Golden Army.
The Golden Army, yes, sir. All right, I hear you have some notes. Note away, my friend.
I do. Originally, creator Mike Mignola had no plans for Hellboy. He was just a character, a big demon with the name Hellboy on his belt buckle that he just kind of sketched on a whim at a Comic-Con. But circa the early 90s, he started planning on kind of developing his own line of creator-owned comics. He had the stories in mind, but he just needed that perfect character, and that was who he ended up turning back to. Was just this kind of random-ass doodle. And he made his very first appearance, albeit not in his own titled book, in San Diego Comic-Con Comics #2 in August 1993. Again, how things can change in such a short amount of time. Fast forward to 2011, and he was ranked number 25 on IGN's list of their top 100 comic book heroes of all time, thanks in no small part to the two movies we are discussing tonight. But before that, before he was a box office sensation, before he experienced this huge surge of popularity in the 2010s that eventually led him to be included in a Mortal Kombat. No, not Mortal Kombat. Injustice 2. Yes, he was a downloadable character in Injustice 2. He was monumentally successful in Dark Horse Comics, had quite the following. Hellboy is a half-demon originally summoned to Earth to usher in the end of all things on behalf of the Third Reich. However, one thing led to another, and he was ultimately adopted by the Allied forces, raised in the manner of an American human child, and eventually trained as the cornerstone of the International Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense, an agency whose sworn mission is to bump back when things go bump in the night. And, kind of the most interesting thing about him is in a lot of ways he is just like a lot of other heroes. He's a lot like Spider-Man, Wolverine, Iron Man, Spawn, Daredevil, Batman, in that he's haunted by his past. He is this, in Earth years, in human years, if you will, about 52 years old. He's made 52 trips around Earth's sun. And yet he has about the mentality of an elder teenager or someone in his early 20s. Oh, are we still there?
Yeah.
Okay, good. We'll edit that part out. But ultimately, despite his quote unquote youth, his mentality anyway, he's deeply haunted by the knowledge that it's his destiny to bring about Ragnarok, Armageddon. Makes him deeply compelling in that he has always got forces pulling him in opposite directions. One toward the life and the race and the sphere of existence that he loves, and the other toward what he was made for. There's a reason he's known as the right hand of doom, and it isn't just because of that giant whammer on the end of his right arm. So the first movie really doesn't have much of an interesting story as far as its development. It's not necessarily something that was long gestating. It came out in 2004, directed and co-written by Guillermo del Toro, who at the time was, I believe, his best-known film to date had been, his biggest box office success had been Blade 2, which we have also covered on this show previously. It was an origin story. That's about the most I can say. The most I can say about it. Mignola was very happy with how it came out. It was visually dazzling. It was charming. Ron Perlman, as he typically does, looked like he was having nothing short of the time of his life playing the big guy. And by dollars its opening weekend, ultimately made $99.4 million worldwide on a $66 million budget. So it might have been a thin margin of profit, but a profit nonetheless. To date, it ranks with an 81% on Rotten Tomatoes out of 200 reviews. So, being a bit of a critical darling and being huge among fans, it they still decided that a sequel was in order. But here's where we begin the theme of life generally getting in the way of this property moving forward in the intended direction. It was initially slated for a 2006 release, but that got bumped back when Revolution Studios' distribution deal with Columbia Pictures fell through, and Revolution Toro, but this time it would be co-written between Del Toro and Mike Mignola himself, and they bandied about several original ideas for the script. One was to recreate the classic stories of Wolfman, Dracula, and Frankenstein. Fuck yes, inject that shit straight into my veins. Another was to adapt the Almost Colossus arc from the comics featuring Roger the Homunculus. But eventually, what they settled on was a hybridized base story based on various folklore pools to sort of complement Mignola's, at the time, more recent stories that were focusing increasingly on mythology, as opposed to putting Hellboy in kind of a fictionalized historic context, such as, Allies versus Nazis, and boy, was it resoundingly successful. Opened up with $35.9 million to stop its predecessor's opening weekend. Unfortunately, once more, circumstance gets in the way. Plummeted 71% in its second weekend. Why did it go downhill if it was so apparently popular and it's so beloved today? 3 little words, kiddos. The Dark Knight. But ultimately, even Batman could only slow it down for so long, as it made $160.4 million worldwide, did boffo money on home video, and still ranks today with an 86% on Rotten Tomatoes based on 245 reviews. And of course, the tail end of it, the very end of the third act, spends a lot of time setting up a sequel. So what exactly happened to this curtain call? Fucking everything happened to it. Absolutely goddamn everything. Initially, Del Toro was slated to come back and direct it again, which makes sense, seeing as how Ron Perlman would say off and on throughout the several years it languished in developmental purgatory that he was the only man who could truly end this trilogy on the right note. Unfortunately, for the longest time, Del Toro was set to direct The Hobbit until he dropped out in 2010. That's got to free him up, you're thinking, right? Right? Well, he hinted in 2012 that the trilogy conclusion was coming, but prophetically, Mignola countered in 2013 that it wasn't really very likely at all, and in fact, vetoed GDT's idea of telling Hellboy 3's story as a comic instead. Year after year, one thing after another continually intervened. First, it was Del Toro's success directing Pacific Rim. Then, throughout the years, it would continue to be the massive budget that GDT's vision reportedly demanded. Perlman certainly wasn't getting any younger, and it was a project with a history of technically making a profit, but really nothing impressive. However, if you want to point technically to something that was probably the last nail in the coffin, you can look no further than Pacific Rim Uprising. See, in July 2015, Del Toro said that Legendary Pictures might be willing to fund Hellboy 3 if Pacific Rim Uprising did well at the box office. He said, quote, "The hard fact is that the movie's going to need about $120 million, and there's nobody knocking down our doors to give it to us. It's a little beyond Kickstarter." Unfortunately, even that deal fell through when Del Toro bowed out of directing the Pacific Rim sequel. And finally, in February 17, Del Toro announced via Twitter, "Must report that 100% Hellboy 3 will not happen. And that pretty much brings us around to today. Eventually, we didn't get the swan song for the original cast, director, and writers, but circa 2014, Mignola got together with writer Andrew Crosby and producers to begin gestating a new film. It was originally meant to be a sequel, but Perlman said, "Oh, no Del Toro, I'm out." Neil Marshall joined up. David Harbour signed on to play Big Red, and all of a sudden, it was off to reboot land. On May 8th, 2017, Millennium Films announced they were in negotiations with producers Larry Gordon and Lloyd Levin with the working title Hellboy: Rise of the Blood Queen. And Mignola ultimately signed on to co-write the script with Cosby and Christopher Golden to set up a gritty, proper R-rated reboot, which would be distributed by Lionsgate. It tanked. It's tanking miserably. And that pretty much brings us right about up to today. So, Mark, take us back to where it all began.
Alrighty. With the help of Wikipedia, I'm going to whip through this original plot synopsis for the 2004 Hellboy. So it's 1944. Picture it. And with the help of fictional Russian mystic Grigory Rasputin, the Nazis build a dimensional portal off the coast of Scotland and intend to free the Ogdru Jihad, monstrous entities imprisoned in deep space, to aid them in defeating the Allies. Rasputin opens the portal with the aid of his disciples, Ilsa von Hopstein and Absturmbrandferen Karl Ruprecht Kronen, member of the Thule Society and Adolf Hitler's top assassin. An Allied team is sent to destroy the portal, guided by a young scientist named Trevor Brutenholm, who is well versed in the occult. The German team is killed and the portal is destroyed, and in the process of absorbing Rasputin, while Hopstein and Cronin escape, the Allied team discovers that an infant demon with a right-handed stone came through the portal. They dub him Hellboy, because they already had a demon and his name was Jeff. And Brutenholm adopts him. 60 years later, FBI agent John Myers is transferred to the Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense, it's the BPRD, at the request of Brutenholm, where he meets the adult Hellboy and a psychic amphibious humanoid named Abe Sapien. He learns that a third BPRD member, Liz Sherman, has recently checked into a mental hospital to protect others from her volatile pyrokinetic abilities. She's right next to Jean Grey, who's got Dark Phoenix powers. Despite regular visits and coaxing from Hellboy, she's determined not to return. Cronin and Hopstein resurrect Rasputin in the mountains of Moldova, and the three unleash a demon known as Samael. Got it. So Rasputin imbues Samael with the power to reincarnate and split his essence, causing two of the creature's eggs to hatch and mature each time one dies. Look, Doc, I'm multiplying. Rasputin visits Liz as she sleeps, activating her powers and almost destroying the hospital, like you do. Myers convinces her to return to the Bureau. Samael's ability to multiply becomes a problem. Why wouldn't it? As Hellboy repeatedly kills it, dozens are born. Concluding the eggs are in the sewer, Hellboy, Abe, and several FBI agents go down in the sewer to destroy them. Abe is injured while looking for the eggs, while Cronin kills most of the agents. Cronin, whose mutilated body is run by mechanical parts, shuts himself down, pretending to be defeated. Cronin's body is brought to the Bureau. FBI Director Tom Manning is angered by Hellboy's recklessness. Myers takes Liz out for coffee to talk. Hellboy, jealous, covertly follows them, leaving the Bureau unguarded. Cronin reanimates himself, and Rasputin appears at the Bureau, confronting Professor Brutenholm. Rasputin offers him a vision of the future, showing Hellboy is the agent that will destroy the world, a common theme throughout these movies. However, Brutenholm tells Rasputin he will always see Hellboy as his son. Rasputin, respecting Brutenholm for raising Hellboy, directs a quick death. Brutenholm is stabbed in the neck by Cronin and dies clutching a rosary. Manning takes over the BPRD and locates Rasputin's mausoleum in an old cemetery outside Moscow, Russia. A team led by Manning and Hellboy enters the mausoleum but swiftly becomes separated. Hellboy and Manning find their way to Cronin's lair and defeat him. Hellboy reunites with Liz and Myers at Samael's new nest, but the creatures overwhelm them. Liz uses her pyrokinetic powers to incinerate the Samaels and their eggs. Hellboy, Liz, and Myers lose consciousness and are captured by Rasputin and Hopstein. Rasputin sucks Liz's soul out of her body, then tells Hellboy to release the Agru Jihad in return for her soul. Hellboy awakens his true power as Anung Unrama, causing his horns to regrow, and begins to release the Agru Jihad. Myers breaks out of his restraint, subdues Hopstein, and reminds Hellboy that he can defy his destiny, a running theme throughout these movies. Remembering his true self and what Brutenholm brought him up to be, Hellboy breaks his horns, reseals the Agru Jihad, and stabs Rasputin with one of his broken horns, like you do. Instead of dying, though, Rasputin is possessed by a creature from the Agru Jihad, the tentacled Behemoth. Bursts out a guitar and drums and proceeds to play heavy metal. No, it's a joke about Behemoth. Behemoth, the band. Bursts out of his body and grows to immense size, killing him and Hopstein.
I was gonna say, how goddamn high did you get through this?
Hellboy allows himself to be swallowed by the beast, then detonates a belt of hand grenades and destroys it from the inside. He whispers something in Liz's ear, and she is revived. Ta-da! When she asks how her soul was returned, Hellboy replies that he said, "Hey, you on the other side, let her go, because for her, I'll cross over, and then you'll be sorry." Liz and Hellboy share a kiss. Aww. All right. I saw this initially in its first run in the theater. I don't remember a tremendous amount. This came out in 2004? Really? Oh,
yeah.
Okay, you know what I'm thinking of? You said The Dark Knight. That makes more sense. 2008. Never mind. Scratch that. Going back. 2004. A little confused. I saw this in the theaters with my buddies, and I remember at the time thinking, like, it was fine. I was never a big fan of the Hellboy comics. I didn't read them. When it came to Dark Horse, I was more into that iteration of Star Wars and the Alien and Predator comics. I didn't read much of the non-franchise stuff like Hellboy or some of the other Dark Horse favorites. So this was not a familiar character to me. Watching the movie, I remember thinking at the time, and then going back and watching it this past week, that, Ron Perlman, it was hard for me not to compare him to the new one that I saw over the weekend, which I don't want to drag the podcast down by going back over that. If you want to hear myself and Ronnie talk about the differences in the portrayals, go check out this week's Damn You Hollywood. But I will say this. Ron Perlman is more of a grizzled, aged Hellboy, a wizened Hellboy, a Hellboy who has seen some things. What was an interesting portrayal. Watching it again this week, look, Ron Perlman's not a bad actor, and certainly Guillermo. I think for where I was, and this is where I want you to kind of jump in, Sean. Guillermo del Toro definitely has a style of his own. We did a on trial for Pan's Labyrinth earlier this year. He has a very, very creative, fairy tale-ish, folklore out there style. I would have loved to have seen his iteration of The Hobbit, which apparently would have cost $1.5 zillion to do it his way. This is why he was no longer on that project. And so Hellboy definitely had a unique aesthetic. I'm just not sure it's an aesthetic that I particularly find enjoyable to sit through, more than once. But I think you have a different opinion. I think you're really into his artsy style. So let's start there.
Well, okay. Well, let me fire back at you. What did you not enjoy about his particular approach?
This is more going to come up when we talk about the Golden Army, but it's for a material about a demon that struggling with its own humanity, its destiny. For characters that are supposed to be, from a comic book that I've now gone back and read that has a grit to it. This comes across a little. His aesthetic comes across a little Disney to me, which is weird because Pan's Labyrinth was anything
Disney,
but
really?
Disney. Yeah, Pan's Labyrinth was anything but bright and shiny and soft and cuddly and and smooth. Okay. This has a very smooth aesthetic. Like when I look at Hellboy, and I look at his makeup and everything. I hate doing this, but compared to the new one, the reboot, it's just too smooth. It's an obvious costume. I'm not really taken in by the look. It should be more jagged, more devilish looking, more I just crawled out of hell. Abe Sapien, again, looks like he should be standing next to Winnie the Pooh giving my kids hugs and kisses when they walk through the Magic Kingdom. I can see where they wanted, why they went out of their way to do a rated R version this time around, because this one, what was it, PG-13?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely seems a little restrained. It's like, well, we can't get too gross, we can't get too gritty, we can't get too ugly. We have to keep it kind of within this little pretty box, and that was off-putting for me.
I get where you're coming from, and let's start with the justification before I get to my actual opinion. The thing you have to keep in mind about this is we had not had Logan or Deadpool 2 yet. Those movies had not yet proven that you could make an R-rated movie based on a debatably well-known comic character and still have it make massive, massive box office. This was in the, relatively speaking, early days of the big superhero movie boom. We had gotten X-Men, we had gotten Spider-Man. I believe Spider-Man 2 was on the way and approaching fairly fast. This was fairly early in the game, so they weren't really quite willing to take that chance quite yet and go whole hog, and especially since gore is costly. You have to keep that in mind. To really do intense gore and violence the right way, that can ratchet up a budget so fast. And you would be talking about asking an awful lot of money for what was not a mainline Marvel or DC property. It was a Dark Horse comic. And it would have been seen as a huge, huge risk, since it wasn't necessarily a character who was as recognizable as the Hulk or Spider-Man or the X-Men or Batman, etc., etc., etc. So I think some of that restraint came out of necessity. But with that being said, I would have loved it if you would have combined so many elements of this movie with a little more of, for what I'm told, I haven't seen it yet, for what I'm told, the intensity of a quintessential Hellboy. Because, for starters, from what I've seen of the trailers, I'm already kind of early on still considering Ron Perlman to be the quintessential take on Big Red. He's got that swagger about him, that assuredness, but with just kind of the right dash of clueless oafishness and the ability to really turn it up when needed. David Hyde Pierce was such a perfect foil as level-headed Abe Sapien. John Hurt is, John Hurt. you can't do much. You can't do much better for Doctor himself. Selma Blair showed up. She read lines. She went to the business. She went to the factory. She did a business. And everything just sort of came together into this story where these monumentally threatening forces of evil, and not even necessarily always evil, just, these seemingly otherworldly powers are supposed to exist hidden in plain sight right under humanity's nose. And it's just kind of sort of an uneasy disguise of it all. And I think that's why you get a lot of the subtlety that comes out of this. Mm-hmm. Is the idea of, how can I put this? Kind of wanting the worlds to seem not too disparate and to almost kind of feel believable. So you sort of couldn't go too uncanny valley with it, because otherwise it kind of would have taken you out of the mindset of the melding of these two realms. And that's something that Del Toro does phenomenally well. I mean, he even did it incredibly well in Blade 2. He did it in Pan's Labyrinth. He's not making striking, violent, bold strokes with how he blends reality and fantasy. A lot of times he's doing his best to kind of be Bob Ross making his happy little what the fuck trees.
I think that's where the disconnect is for me. If you don't tell me that there's a comic book, and I think it's why I reacted differently the first time I saw it to now, since I haven't read some of the comics. The comic begs you to create a movie with an edge to it. And I hear what you're saying. Look, I don't disagree with your analysis at all. I think in 2004, 3, 2, whenever they started this, clearly not 4, they shot it today. But in the early 2000s, where the thought of making a rated R comic book movie was unfathomable, there's only so much you can do. But then I guess that's the Faustian bargain you make as a creator. Hey, Mike Mignola, we want to make your Hellboy into a feature-length motion picture. Fantastic! I have all these ideas. Slow down. You
know what I would almost suggest? This is almost a movie that came along about 10 years too late.
Really? Not 10 years too early, huh?
Well, you could look at it either way. You could look at it either 10 years too early or 10 years too late. Because it seems at times like a movie that if you were to go in the direction you're talking about, the best time to have made it might have actually kind of been in the 90s when studios were not shelling out money to make movies about the big boys of the comic world.
Right.
They just weren't able to try as they might. They weren't able to get deals done to make Spider-Man and X-Men and whatnot. Batman was seemingly the only one that anybody could get greenlit, and those returns diminished damn fast.
I was going to say, as soon as you said that, I was like, you know what this should have been? This should have been Blade. And when did Blade come?
Okay.
And Blade comes out in 1998.
Okay. Give you a good example. Okay, yeah, Blade. Coming out around the same time as Blade would have been, in fact, right off its coattails, would have probably been the best place to put it. And in fact, that's a better idea than what I was going to say. I was going to say that if you look at some of the other comic movies that were getting made in the 90s, studios were willing to invest in graphic novels and lesser known books like Tank Girl, Judge Dredd. Well, The Crow was certainly beloved, but let's face it, Superman it wasn't. Spawn. So actually, yeah, let's narrow this down a little bit further now that you've given me the idea. Don't make it after Spawn, because that was the movie that convinced Hollywood for the longest time that an R-rated comic movie couldn't work. Then Blade hits theaters, and refresh my memory, Mark, was Blade rated R?
That's what I'm looking for now, so keep going, and I will get an answer for you.
Okay. Okay, regardless of what its actual rating was, Blade was still violent. It was intense. It was grim. It was, well, let's face it, everything that people are now saying they felt all along that Hellboy should have been.
Okay, it's rated R.
So okay, there you have it. So forget what I said earlier, because for some reason Blade entirely slipped my mind. Because then you've got this movie that becomes hugely popular in theaters, hugely popular on home video. You could have followed that up with this, and two things would have happened. Number one, you would have capitalized on that tone and possibly built on it. And number two, DC, because let's see, well, I'm not sure if Hellboy was a DC property yet by this time. But in any case, you would have a movie from another fairly successful comic publisher that was competing with a Marvel character, even if it was one that wasn't marketed as a Marvel character. So that could have made things extremely interesting. But be that as it may, I gotta say, for a movie that was trying to toe the fine line between evoke its source material and still remain viable and accessible to the biggest audience possible, I think Del Toro did a damn fine job in bringing this to life, even if it wasn't maybe exactly what purists would have favored.
I think it. I've used this term a lot in the past 2 weeks. Half pregnant, which I got from who knows where. But I think as I think about this movie and I mull it over in my mind, and look, I'm not going to take anything away from anyone who appreciates it just as it is. You know, it's a painting. It's hanging on the wall. There's no reason to add a mustache to it. It's fine. I get it. But for me, who has no sentimental attachment to the movie, it is just kind of there, and I'm revisiting it because it happens to fit really nicely on my calendar. It just feels like a half-pregnant film compared to its source material. I feel like if you're going to do Hellboy, you go whole hog. And again, we're I don't want to get into a circular conversation of, hey, we just went over this, So I get it. on the one hand, Hollywood, made a slew of rated R, horror-esque action movies. Underworld was another one. You had The Blades. I just had the IMDb page up where it was like, if you liked Hellboy, you'll like the rest of this horse shit. You brought up The Crow, and The Crow is another really great example of, of a comic book that had a real grit, a real aesthetic edge to it. An edgy aesthetic is really what I should have said. That I feel like Hellboy lacks. And it only gets worse with the second film. Now, I don't want to feel like I'm shitting all over this thing, so let me say a few nice things. Let's do a compliment sandwich. And because I do everything backwards, I just gave you the meat. So let me give you two pieces of bread here. I'll say two nice things about the film.
You are making an open-faced compliment sandwich.
Terrific. I think the performances are fine. I think as far as a performance piece for the actors involved, Perlman, you're absolutely right. Some of Blair showed up, got a paycheck, and walked away. And what's amazing is that she's fucking Glenn Close compared to the next one. Oof. But the boys all did fine. The boys all showed up and worked. Ron Perlman's great. Jeffrey Tambor. John Hurt's great. I mean, it's a very well acted piece. I think Perlman makes the Hellboy character very engaging, very sympathetic. If you don't know that the reboot exists, you don't have any. You don't have the comparison to make. To the played like a teenager, who's very angsty portrayal to compare it to. So again, going back to 2004 and examining this, I think his portrayal of a wizened, veteran demon hunter was a good one. So maybe how it looks is a little too smooth, a little too safe, a little too Disney, but it's a well acted piece, and it's an engaging enough story. I mean, if you like the idea of fun-looking monsters killing other monsters, then this is the movie for you.
I would agree. The part where we disagree is still going to be about the look of the movie, because, man, you complain about it looking a little too Disney. Let me tell you something. If the live-action version of Aladdin had looked this good so far, I wouldn't be so opposed to seeing it. This is a damn good-looking movie.
It's too colorful, Sean. It's too colorful. I feel like I'm being blinded by so much color. Don't we? I understand that we live in a world where Zack Snyder has pissed into the camera lens and now everything is sort of a puke.
Well,
filtered,
again,
not everything is grimdark, and so the pendulum has now swung way too far in the other direction. But god damn it, I remember a day where we needed a little darkness in our films.
See, again though, if I really believe that if you were to take the rough edges of the reboot from everything that I've heard,
yes,
and you were to combine it with just the right lighter aspects of the first two movies, in particular Ron Perlman's approach to the character, and a supporting cast you can actually be engaged in, and you were to sew those together in just the right strategic places, you would truly have a quintessential Hellboy.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is the 2004 movie and the 2019 movie are kind of two edges, and we have yet to see something right smack in the middle that that marries both visions of this property. And I don't think you're wrong about that.
Yeah, well, part of the problem is, I hate to say it, but this movie is coming out, the current one, is coming out at a time when it's competing with a DC movie that absolutely spot on, dead center of the bullseye, nails its approach to its character. And that's Shazam. It just gets it. And you see, and that was an example of a movie where when I saw it, it felt like there was just the right balance. There was just enough lightheartedness and fun. There was action. There was a sense of emotional stakes. In fact, after Carrie and I saw it with Alexis last weekend, just as a side note, the only thing that I walked out saying was, "Fuck's sake, somebody have a word with whoever designed the men's costumes." Okay. In that sense, I guess you could say that Shazam was kind of to me what Hellboy was to you. Is I loved most of it, except for the fact that Darla and Mary's costumes looked fine. They looked completely fine. But, and this is going to sound nitpicky as hell, every time you look at one of the men's costumes when they're powered up, it's like people have been stuffed into oversized shells. You can see that it looks more like body armor.
I kept waiting for the balloons to fall out.
Magically manifested from nothing to ideally fit its wearer. You can see the gaps in the neck where there's costume and then there's a space between that and the torso, and it just there's no natural muscle movement, and it just. I was going to
say, I think your connection with your connection, you didn't hear me. I said it looked like when they were, especially the Asian kid. The Asian kid was the worst because it literally looked like if he moved his arms, the balloons were going to all fly out of his costume.
Oh, I would say it's a real tough race between the Asian kid and Zachary Levi's himself. Because, god damn, and my problem with the casting of Zachary Levi from the beginning was the fact that when they finally introduced Black Adam, you put Zachary Levi on, he is not going to look like he can whip Dwayne Johnson's ass. Nope. He is going to look physically overmatched from the second you put them on screen, unless you do the I guess you could call it the reverse, the equal but opposite of the camera trick to make it look like Ian McKellen just towered over what's his name? Not Sean, Elijah Wood.
I keep saying they missed an opportunity to make the John Cena Shazam. It would have been perfect.
No, you're actually absolutely right. That would have been great, and I'm a big Zachary Levi fan, but I guess that's my equivalent to you saying that Hellboy looked too smooth and too colorful. Mm-hmm. Is just the look of them, and that's compared to the fact that Sylvana and the Deadly Sins actually look incredible. They look fantastic. The original Shazam, Jaimin Hansu, looked great. I love the look of the Rock of Eternity, but then amidst that, you've just got that utter silliness in a movie that just hits otherwise all the right notes. So I can kind of see where you're coming from.
I'm going to give you the final word on this. Is there anything else you want to say? That you feel like the audience needs to hear from the lips of Sean about this movie?
Not really. Except that by all means, if you didn't like the reboot, just stop and check this one out if you haven't already. You won't be disappointed.
All right. Moving right along, Footloose and Fancy Free. See, the new Long Road to Ruin, we keep it moving on.
Right. I've learned to rein in my tangents a little bit.
During Christmas of 1955, a young Hellboy is told a bedtime story by his adoptive father, Trevor Brutenholm, of an ancient war between the humans and the magical creatures. After the magical creatures are driven back by the humans, the goblin blacksmith extends an offer to Balor, king of the elves, to build him an indestructible mechanical army. Encouraged by his son Prince Nuada, Balor accepts. The Golden Army subsequently decimates humanity. Regretting his actions, Balor forms a truce with the humans that they will keep to the cities and the magical creatures to the forests. That's a fair trade. They would later sell the forest for a few beads. The crown to command the Golden Army, which can only be worn by one of royal blood, is split into 3 pieces. Nuada, disagreeing with the truce, leaves in exile, and he stomps out of scene. In the present, Nuada returns and begins gathering the pieces of the crown. He collects the first piece from an auction, killing everybody at the site by unleashing the Tooth Fairies, at which point Dwayne Johnson comes in with a hockey stick and beats people to death. And then kills his father for the second piece. His twin sister, Princess Nuala, escapes with the final piece. Meanwhile, at the BPRD, Hellboy is having issues with his girlfriend Liz, and dislikes that their organization must operate in secrecy. Investigating the auction slaughter, Hellboy allows himself to be revealed to the world. In the commotion, Abe Sapien discovers Liz is pregnant. She swears him to secrecy. Furious at Hellboy's actions, the Bureau Superior send the ectoplasmic medium Johann Kraus to rein him in. With Kraus in charge, the team tracks the Tooth Fairies to a secret market under the Brooklyn Bridge. Abe finds Nuala has obtained a map leading to the Golden Army and falls in love with her. Hellboy fights and kills Nuada's accomplice Wink, and an elemental forest god that Nuada summons against him. During the fight, Nuada questions why he fights for the humans when they have driven the magical creatures into hiding, of which he too is one. Nuala is taken under the BPRD's protection. Nuada tracks his sister to the BPRD headquarters using their magical bond, which causes them to share wounds and read each other's thoughts, which gets very uncomfortable when one of them goes out on a date. Nuala hides the final crown. Nuada hides the final crown piece before Nuada finds her, and he battles Hellboy. Nuada critically wounds Hellboy with his spear and abducts Nuala, promising her return in exchange for the crown piece. Unable to remove the spear shard in his wound, Liz and Abe decide to take Hellboy to the Goblin Army's location in the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland. Kraus comes along as he sympathizes with Liz, revealing that he too lost his wife in the accident that caused the loss of his own body. They encounter the Bethmora Goblin, Master Blacksmith, who brings them before the Angel of Death, who is the same fucking creature from Pan's Labyrinth, to retrieve the Spear Shard. Come on, am I wrong about that? Isn't it the same damn thing? The warned Hellboy will doom humanity if he lives, an ongoing theme in these movies, and that she will suffer the most from it. Liz pleads for Hellboy's life because women are unreasonable. The angel removes the shard from Hellboy's chest and tells Liz to give him a reason to live. She reveals to Hellboy, finally, that he will be the father, and the audience of Jerry Spring starts to hoot and holler. You are the father. The Goblin leads the team to the resting place of the Golden Army, where Nuada awaits them. Abe gives him the last piece of the crown, and Nuada awakens the Golden Army and commands them to kill the team. Hellboy challenges Nuada for the right to command the army, as Hellboy is a member of Hell's royal family. Nuada must accept the challenge. Hellboy defeats Nuada and spares his life, but Nuada tries stabbing him. Boo. Nuala commits suicide to stop her brother. The dying Nuada tells Hellboy he will have to choose whether humanity or magical beings must die. Abe psychically shares his feelings with Nuala before she dies. Liz melts the crown apart, deactivating the Golden Army. Hellboy, Liz, Abe, and Johann resign from the BPRD, and Hellboy contemplates his future life with Liz and their baby. Liz corrects babies, revealing that she is pregnant with twins. Okay. Why do you like this movie so much? Like the other one, if my complaint about the other one is that it lacks grit, it's practically The Dark Knight compared to this one. Oh, doggy. What is it about?
It's still too bright for you?
This is fucking Hellboy Goes to Wonderland.
But you know what? Somehow that works for me.
Okay.
Judge me if you want to.
No, I don't want to judge you. I want to open up your skull and dig around your brain with a spoon. I want to know. I want to know. I'm dying to know.
Dude, you want to dig around my brain with a spoon. Mark, have you ever finished a bowl of oatmeal and then just run the spoon around the bottom trying to scrape up the last bits of it?
Sure. I desperately want to know what it is about this movie that tickles your bag so much.
Well, what I liked about it is the first one, I got the impression they were trying to do a lot with a little. They weren't given a whole lot of money to make something that was, you could almost call it almost a pilot project to see if they wanted to go on and make more. And they went the route of telling another Nazi mysticism story, which, God knows, we've heard a lot of those, and they wove it into a reasonably interesting origin story. I would dare say, in fact, one of the better written origin movies of the comic boom. This one, I like the fact that they expanded the stakes to a world that even Hellboy wouldn't have imagined seemingly could have existed. Mythology. Invoking, Balor, who is actually in I believe, Celtic mythology, Irish mythology in general, the Demon King. Just kind of repurposing him as the Elf King. I adored it. I would have, in fact, been just tickled if they would have added even more elements of Irish mythology. It steps up the action. It steps up the scope. I absolutely adored the final fight with the Golden Army and Nuada. I will say that I think I vastly preferred it when it was in the first movie, when it was Doug Jones physically playing Abe Sapiens and an uncredited David Hyde Pierce providing the voice. Which, by the way, interesting little tidbit, Pierce insisted on not being credited because he felt that the real crux of the performance was all on Doug Jones. I've always thought that was kind of admirable of him. But Doug handled both the voice acting and the physical workload in this one, and God love him, it's inferior. You kind of notice right away that it's different, and not different in a good way. Seth MacFarlane as Kraus was a nice touch in that Seth is, nobody gives him credit for him. He's quite a brilliant actor. I didn't even realize it was him until I saw the credits. As you've said before, Jeffrey Tambor gonna Jeffrey Tambor. For what relatively little of the movie he's in, it makes up for the fact that Selma Blair gonna Selma Blair. But I just liked it more. I just liked the idea of him descending even further from kind of just strictly the little points where this dark mythos is trying to creep up and intersect with humanity, and into full on possibly becoming a part of what is basically the world of his birth. And being this time put to a choice between the two. In the first one, he was being strong-armed into accepting his destiny. And in this one, you've got one side that is in fact trying to more so persuade him that don't fight me. This is where you belong. You're one of our people. You're not one of them. So come and join us. But if you're not, fair warning, we will destroy you if you get in our way. It was a nice evolution from the first one. The whole pregnancy subplot did nothing for me, as did the attempted awkward romance between Abe and Nuala. But just overall, it shows how much more they were trying to set up, and it disappoints me so much that we will never get to see what would have happened in a third movie.
Yeah, it's amazing how nothing went right to get that thing off the ground. Between The Hobbit and Pacific Rim, and it's not like well, we didn't get a Hellboy 3, but boy, we got Guillermo del Toro's. Oh no, we didn't. All right, well, at least that second Pacific Rim, no, it didn't. He has nothing to point to that said, well, at least I got this. You know what I mean? The first Pacific Rim did fine, obviously, but it's just it's a shame. For me, I don't know. Maybe I misread the character, but I feel like Hellboy should be cornering loose leprechauns in an alley and gunning them down. Like he needs to walk into like smoky bars and this stuff where we're dealing in high fantasy. I don't know. I don't know if it suits the character. Now you think it does, and you enjoyed it, and it's not like I'm not a fan of high fantasy. My favorite franchise is The Lord of the Rings. I look at Hellboy. Like I'm looking at this picture on Wikipedia of the four of them kind of standing across frame. And he's got a gun. He's got like a 6-shooter, in a trench coat, and he looks very noir. You know what I mean? And he's working for an investigative agency, and and next to him is Selma Blair, who's doing her best to look like the chick from Underworld, Kate Beckinsale, and it's just I don't know if high fantasy was the way to go with this. I mean, they certainly thought it, and they gave it their best shot. But I would, I would much rather see a bit more mystery. This was an adventure. This was an action adventure with a character who looked like he got whisked out of a noir and thrown into it, and having to deal with the consequences of his new surroundings. Which that might work for some people. Clearly, it works for you. It didn't really work for me. I much prefer him working a case. I much prefer him to be Johnny Depp in Mexico. I'm just an FBI agent walking my beat.
So yeah, I would also watch that movie. I would watch the hell out of that movie. But for this one being what we actually got, I still rather loved it.
I don't want to belabor the point. I don't have a whole lot. I mean, we covered a lot of the aesthetic interest, in just the overall discussion of both movies. So, anything else on this that you feel is worth talking about?
Not really. I've really got nothing. When you kind of compared it to Lord of the Rings, I both think it's funny, but I also think it's funny because it's true. I don't know. Now you've got me thinking about whether this wouldn't have been better told as a comic arc.
No, you know what their idea for whatever the third one was, I think that was proposed. Yeah, I don't know. This might have worked better as a graphic novel. Like you think about Lobo, the DC character, and clearly Lobo works with a certain aesthetic and a certain setting, but they've definitely dabbled with Lobo in some sillier places.
You know what I think this might work as, if I'm being perfectly honest? Just an Elseworld story.
Yeah. I think it's a one-shot graphic novel, Hellboy in Wonderland, and be done with it.
Yeah, it's like the Hellboy equivalent to Gotham by Gaslight.
Yeah. All right. Let's go ahead and close the book on this. We have discussed the Hellboy franchise, and we did in less than 8 hours. Good for us.
We've learned in the intervening couple of years.
All right, so the next time Sean and I will be getting together, let's see, what do we got going on in the month of May? We're back to On Trial on May 16th, and this was a special request. We do take requests, ladies and gentlemen. Andrew Graham requested that we do the Three Musketeers movie, the one with the late great what's his face there? Oh gosh, help me out, Sean.
The late great. I'm trying to think of who that starred in that movie would be dead. There was Kiefer Sutherland, Oliver Platt, Charlie Sheen, Tim Curry, Rebecca De Mornay.
Okay, you know what? I'm thinking of First Night.
Chris O'Donnell.
Yeah, I'm wrong movie. What's his face who plays the Joker who is now dead was in something else I'm
Heath
confused.
Ledger.
There we are.
You're thinking of Heath Ledger and A Knight's Tale.
Okay, so not First Night either. Good. Let's start this again. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Long Road to Ruin.
Oh, no, you don't.
Let's see. What year movie are we doing here? Is it 1993 or is it 2011? Which year did this come out? Yeah, 93.
Damn sure wasn't 2011.
Okay, yes, The Three Musketeers from 1993, as you said, with Charlie Sheen, Kiefer Sutherland, and Chris O'Donnell. Whew. That is what we will be doing next. I will be prosecuting. Sean will be defending. The following week, we will be doing yet another
easy to defend. I love that movie.
The following week, we will be doing another Long Road to Ruin, another pair of flicks, as I said earlier, for John Wick. I've never actually seen any of these before, so this will be new to me.
I'm not the only one! Hooray! I finally have no excuse to not sit down. I'm excited.
So we're doing that because that same week we'll be doing a Damn You Hollywood for John Wick 3 Parabellum. In June, we will be doing a pair of On Trials, back to back, front to front, up and down. Godzilla 1998 with Matthew Broderick, and then the following week, X-Men 3 The Last Stand, because that's the same week as Dark Phoenix, as we say goodbye to the Fox iteration of the X-Men movies. In July, nothing. But we kick off August 1st with an On Trial for Pulp Fiction, because the same week we will be doing a Damn You Hollywood for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, if she could. We will also be doing an On Trial for the 1982 iteration of Swamp Thing. And we'll be doing that because of the Swamp Thing TV series on DC Universe. All things being equal and landing where they should, that should be August 22nd. In September, we will be we're going to be doing things a little bit differently. I will actually just be a judge on that show, and we're going to invite Andrew Graham in to prosecute 13 Hours. Andrew Graham will special guest on that show. 13 Hours, Sean will defend it, Andrew Graham will prosecute. Apparently this is a passion project for him. So
Cool.
Yeah. The following week, unless I'm in Chicago at the time, we will be doing an on trial for the animated feature Gotham by Gaslight.
In Chicago, that's awfully specific.
Yeah, my wife and I. It's around the time of her birthday and our wedding anniversary, so we're either gonna go to Epcot or we're gonna go to Chicago. We haven't decided yet. It's all based on money.
That is the one thing about Lady Jet Bear and I. we don't know exactly when our anniversary is.
In October, our creature feature horror feature for the month is Long Road. We're going to be doing a Long Road to Ruin for the From Dusk Till Dawn trilogy, and we'll be doing an on trial for Keanu Reeves' Constantine on Halloween. So after we take the kids trick or treating, we're going to saddle up to the computer, light a candle, tell some ghost stories, and put Constantine on trial. The month of November, Robert Winfrey don't know it yet, but he's in for a surprise because we're dedicating an entire week to the Charlie's Angels franchise. Our part of that is we'll be doing Charlie's Angels Full Throttle on trial.
Yes!
Yes! And finally, as I said earlier, we'll be ending the year with our Christmas show, which is the Santa Claus trilogy, Long Road to Ruin on December 10th. So that's all the Sean and Mark stuff on the calendar this year. Sean, what do you got going on these days?
Well, about the only thing I have got going on right now is, well, let's see. Pulling up my calendar here. That's not my calendar windows. Thank you. Next week, if by the off chance you happen to be in the West Plains, Missouri area, specifically on the weekend of the 26th to the 28th, come find me at OzCon. I will be there with Lady Jet Bear, manning the Honeysuckle Rose Creations booth on a bit of a nice romantical working vacation for us. And by working vacation, I mean we're going to be also retrieving some of my stuff to bring back to the house. And the week after that, since one of the things we'll be bringing back is my bigger TV, I am going to be returning to streaming on what I'm going to try to once more make a regular basis. That starts Friday night at, I'm going to tentatively say, 8 p.m. Central Time, and also 8 p.m. Central Time to 10 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday. Don't know what I'm going to be playing yet, but hey, after a long social media vacation, I am making my way back over to Twitter, so follow me on Twitter at Comer Codex for updates on when I'm going to be podcasting, what I'm going to be streaming in the near future, any other projects that I happen to come up with. It's just, God, it's good after 2 years to finally have my feet back on solid ground again. It's different.
Well, we're all happy for you, Sean. All right, it's been fun dusting this off, and again, like I said, we'll hit it up every once in a while where the opportunity presents itself. Hope you enjoyed listening tonight, and we hope to offend you sometime in the near future.